Well, it's a huge relief for patients who are going in for angioplasties. The NPPA, which controls prices of drugs, has now capped prices for stents in two categories. One is the bare metal stents, where the prices have been capped at 7,260 rupees. In the other category, which is the drug-eluting stents and bioresorbable vascular stents, the prices have been capped at 29,600 rupees. Now, this is a sharp cut from what have been the current prices of stents in the market. Currently, drug-eluting stents and bioresorbable stents have been priced anywhere between 75,000 to even 1,95,000 rupees, and bare metal stents have been anywhere between 25,000 rupees to 50,000 rupees. So it's a huge cut that the NPPA has marked for these stents, and certainly a big relief for the patients who are going in for these angioplasties. One thing that I want to bring forth before we talk to Vikas Dandekar on what this really means in the market for patients and for the industry is the scathing order that the NPPA had come out with. In their order, they said that they had found huge unethical markups in the supply chain that resulted in irrational, restrictive and exorbitant prices in a failed market system, and a price asymmetry between doctors and patients, which pushed patients into a financial misery. So in a sense, the NPPA looked at a lot of data that was given to them, and they came to a conclusion that the prices which were being quoted in the market for stents in all the three categories was a huge markup, and that certainly was a negative for patients, and they worked in favor of the patients by reducing the cap of the prices. Well, because if I can talk to you about what this really means in the industry for the patients, it certainly is a big cut and a huge relief and benefit. But how does this entire move came about, this price control for stents? Because most of the stents are, if I'm not mistaken, imported.
Yes. So it's been a very long time that the government has been keeping a track of this exorbitant pricing of stents, and knowing that the incidence of cardiovascular complications have been increasing in this country. There was a massive need for some kind of an intervention by the government, and it started looking at this issue for a couple of years after a lot of public outcry that something needs to be done, and we have been reporting and also writing about it that stents have been going through the roof for most of the patients, while there is no way to actually find out the cost of manufacturing those stents. So technologically, the industry has moved into more and more complicated and more patient-friendly stents, but at the same time, it's been a huge burden for the patients who have not been able to afford the afford the device or the stent. So, from maybe about 13,000 that we see now for government supplies, for central government supplies, for the normal patients in private settings, that price was somewhere around 60,000, 70,000 rupees, and that also not the latest generation stent. So the patient was getting deprived, and there was no way to find out what exactly will be the real price of the stent to the patient, because the supplies will be to the hospitals, the patient will be on the bed and he will be treated by the doctors, and there will be no way that the patient's relatives or whoever is the caretaker can actually find that the price. So the procedure cost, the cost of the fees of the doctors, the hospital beds, all of it accumulated into a massive financial burden for the patient. So this intervention was much needed, and after a lot of deliberations, the government has taken this step. 30,000 rupees for bioresorbable stent, and for bare metal stent 7,200 looks like a very steep cut, but at the same time it's a big relief for the patients.
Well, if we talk from the perspective of the manufacturers, because there has been a lot of resistance from the manufacturers as well as the importers, because most of it is imported and not manufactured in India, where they keep talking of how the quality could be impacted if the prices are brought down, and how they need to bring in the fact that their manufacturing costs are also high, and obviously when you're importing it, the costs again add up. What has been your in your talks with the manufacturers, what has been their view on this?
So far as domestic suppliers are concerned, they are homegrown companies and have been able to supply products at very low costs. The ones which come to mind are the Sahajanand and Merrill. These have been at the forefront, not very big companies, but at the same time they have been doing some cutting edge work. So far as global companies are concerned, they are at the top of the research heap. There is no doubt that Abbott does and Medtronic do a lot of intensive research work, and so their costs are high. But it also adds up in terms of their manufacturing setup and the kind of markups that have been given to the doctors. So there is a little bit of a gap there in understanding exactly what should be the right markup. So this particular pricing should probably be able to bring an end to that anomaly.
But do you think the research that goes behind these stents and the big companies that put money into research of these stents could somewhere be impacted because of such a big price cap?
So, so far as global companies are concerned, they have a huge market to cater to. And there requires a lot of research work, and development of this stent typically requires a lot of engineering skills and a lot of skills which come from the medical side. So it's not easy, all given, but at the same time to have patients on pricing which can build volumes probably will work better for MNCs.
One of our viewers here has said that इलाज को महंगा करने में दवा कंपनियों का बहुत बड़ा role रहा है. Do you agree to this?
Absolutely. There is, we've seen the entire uproar over drug pricing in the US, and there is a lot of deliberations happening there also on how do we control costs of medicines. So what we have here in NPPA is probably a good measure in terms of capping prices where it is going through an unreasonable process.
At this point in time, let me also, talk about the implementation part of this order. The operative part of this order says that from February 13th, which is when the order came out, all prices of all the stents would come down. So, which includes all the stents which are currently in the trade channels as well. Now, that throws open a big risk and a question mark on how it will be implementable. Do the manufacturing companies and the importers, take back all the stents which are currently in the trade channels? How does it go if today a patient is going to the hospital for an angioplasty and is about to buy a stent?
Sure,
what happens to them? Do you think
yeah,
the chances of cheating would go up?
Yes, this may be a little complicated for the patients because overnight it will be very difficult for the hospital or the supply chain to come to an alignment with the new pricing. Many people may not be even aware of this development, those who know may not be watching news. So it might create some logistical issues, and for companies to go back and change the labeling and the pricing might also pose serious challenges. So it might become a problem. There may be a need of a correction there.
But, in your view, what could have been a better way to deal with it? Because if you give them a time frame, what happens to the patients who are going into angioplasty now?
So maybe about a month or so is a rational time, which many times companies have been given so that they can change labels. So that's probably could have been the solution. But to do this also means, by doing this, the NPPA probably also means that there has been a real serious issue there in terms of stents being supplied at a very exorbitant price.
Just one more question from the manufacturers and the importers' perspective. How do they go about it right now? Some of them who we spoke to even said that the price cut is too steep, what the government has gone through. What the Indian industry was batting for was possibly a 50% cut or so, but what has come down is, I think, more than 1/4 or 1/5 from what the prices were in the market.
So this control, this whole move to control prices was objected from various quarters. At the same time, there were many other stakeholders who were actually supporting this. So, so far as implementation will be a serious challenge, nobody expected the prices to come down to this level. So, we don't know exactly what were the parameters. There were lots of deliberations that came in. We saw so many of the drafts and all what could be used. When the NPPA has taken a call like this, probably 30,000 in the cases of bioresorbable stents and 7,000 odd in the case of bare metal and drug-eluting stents. This is where they found it. To my knowledge, probably there will be some representations made and some submissions may be there. There may always be a negotiating part.
Just as a last question, I wanted to come to the part of the hospitals and the role that they play. And one of our viewers has even asked that question, that do you really think hospitals will reduce operation fees even after reduction in the cost of stents? So what is the role that hospitals play in this entire scheme of things? Because cost of stent is one thing, but then there are a lot of other costs, like you were earlier alluding to, that which are attached to the overall treatment cost. So
absolutely.
How will it pan out from the hospital's perspective?
So this is a very, very important question. So even in the US, or say for example even in the Indian context, the prices of medicines forms a small part. In many cases it does form a big part, but in most of the cases, prices of medicine is a small component of the overall healthcare cost. Now the overall healthcare cost includes hospitals, fees of doctors, and then the treatment cost, which actually goes in several months. So the industry has always been objecting to just targeting prices of drugs or devices and leaving the entire hospital chain free, which probably is what the government might want to do, because healthcare is not just the prerogative of the pharmaceutical companies or device companies. It is also to do with hospital costs and the doctor's charges. That's also where the focus should be.
Well, some of our viewers on Facebook have also asked questions on how will the Indian companies be impacted. Well, I think there is just 1 or 2 Indian companies who are manufacturing stents at a large scale right now in India. So the impact will be minimal as far as the India versus global companies are concerned. But this price cap is certainly going to hit both Indian as well as multinationals, because like we were discussing earlier, the extent of price cut has been too steep from what the industry was expecting. The industry was expecting possibly a price cut of about 50%, but what has come now is more than 1/4 or 1/5 of the pricing. But certainly a good move from for the patients. Well, just to wrap it up for our viewers here who are watching Facebook Live, it's a big move from the price controlling authority here in India, who have cut stent prices which are used in angioplasties. Drug-eluting stents and the bioresorbable stents, the price cap now is 29,600 rupees. So no hospital, no manufacturer can charge anything above 29,600 rupees for a drug-eluting or a bioresorbable stent. As far as bare metal stents are concerned, the price cap is at 7,260 rupees. So that will be the cap, that will be the maximum price that any manufacturer or hospital can charge. Big relief for patients. Some concerns from the manufacturing and the industry side, where they question on how they're going to meet their costs. But certainly the government has moved ahead from the point of view of the patients. But the big question here that remains is, how will this order be implemented in the next couple of days? With that, we'll wrap up this Facebook Live here with Vikas. Thank you so much, Vikas. And this is Archana Shukla.